Hey, are you there?
Yeah. How you
Yeah,
doing?
it's good. I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, just a minute. Just got to move where I am. You watching that podcast tonight?
Am I listening to what?
Did you happen to watch that podcast tonight?
Not the newest one, but I've listened to a couple of them before, though.
Yeah, no. This fella that was on tonight, I used to, I worked with him when he was a fireman. He was in ladder 124, and I was in 218 engine. But he, let me just shut this down here. He was unbelievable guy. You know, I'm sure you heard saying jack of all trades, master of none.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this guy was the jack of all trades and the master of every trade. You know, one of the fellas, he became a lieutenant in ladder 154 after he got promoted. And while he was over there, they had a kind of like a game that went around 154's kitchen. And they would come up with a tool. Somebody would come up with a tool, like after dinner. Guy would say, you know, he'd start out with a tool. All right, how many things can you do with a Halligan tool? And then they would see how many things they could do with a Halligan tool. Well, one night they came up with a 2.5-gallon pressurized extinguisher. It was like, all right, how many things can you do with that? Well, this guy, Danny Buckeye's his name, he came up with 103 things that you could do with a pressurized fire extinguisher. It's just to give you an idea on the kind of mind that this guy had, you know, or has, you know. But here's a tip that he gave tonight, and this is something I learned. Car fires. Now, I'm sure you guys go to car fires, right?
Mm-hmm. All the time.
Okay. Now, you go to a car fire. Now, you know when you go into a gas station and you go to put gas in your gas tank and you open up the gas cap and the pressure comes out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, he said you go to car fires, you got an engine fire in the car. He said you go back to where somebody got to go back to where the gas cap is. All right. And he said, as long as that pressure is in the tank, it's going to force the fuel up into the engine compartment. And if the fuel line breaks, it's going to spray the fuel, you know. And he said, so you go back to where the gas cap is. He said, now, before you unscrew the gas cap, you know, and take it off, he said, always look the opposite way. Look away from it and reach over to it so you're out of the way of it. And just loosen it up a little bit so you can let some of the pressure out gradually, and then take the gas cap off and release the pressure in the gas tank. And once you do that, the gas can no longer flow up into the engine compartment. You know, that's how the cars are designed today, to keep the fuel tank pressurized. You know, and he said, plus, by doing that, taking the pressure out of the fuel tank, and if the fire ends up going back that far and gets to the fuel tank, he goes, the fuel tank is already under pressure, and now you got the fire hitting it. What do you think is going to happen? You know, so little tip, and that's what they do at the end of all of their podcasts. You know, they do the old school tip of the day, and that was one of his tips tonight. That, like I said, I didn't even realize that. You know, and you know, something now that I'll pass on to the guys in the volley house where I belong. You know, and you can pass this on to the guys in your company and your department. Just a little thing. Crack open that gas cap a little bit, release some of the pressure, and then once you release most of the pressure, he goes, always look away from it because you never know what's going to come out. Then you take the gas cap off, and it stops the flow of gasoline up to the engine.
Huh. Would have never thought of it. Something that simple, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and that's why I enjoy these podcasts. If I don't watch them on Thursday night, I go back onto YouTube and I watch them, and just from the old school tip of the day, you can learn a lot of things. You know, because the people that are coming on these podcasts, they're all senior people. You know, and got a lot of background. But anyway, that was a little old school tip of the day. I don't know where we left off. I've been writing, doing a lot more writing, and I called a friend of mine today that the guy Phil Burns, the guy that I sent you the 2 books about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I spoke to him today about going about publishing and all that, and about writing and what have you, and he just did it. He goes, look, I just did it old school, the way you're doing. He goes, writing it down, making notes. He goes, make sure you have a lot of post-its around, because things will come back into your head and then you got to stick them in somewhere. So, he goes, I would write my story and then I would leave post-its on the pages, reminders to put these things in, so I said, all right, I'll try that. But anyway, so I'm up to where I'm getting assigned to Rescue 4. But I do have some notes here from some stories, some of the fires that I had that were pretty cool. I think I told you about the church, one of the church fires?
Not recent. I think that might have been something we covered in the first episode that I forgot to record. I remember briefly talking about it, but not anything recently.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it, and if you remember it or whatever, and you go, yeah, now I remember. If you want to move on to something else, we can, but anyway, this particular church fire. We're in quarters, and we get an alarm, and we look at the box number. Now, what we call a box is a fire alarm box is on the quarters, and every fire alarm box, when they had them in the city, I believe they don't have them anymore. They all had numbers, and you had, when you were in an engine company or a ladder company, there were a certain number of boxes in your area that were called your first due boxes, which meant actually you were the first due company, or supposed to be the first due company into that box, So anyhow, this alarm comes in, and it comes over a teleprinter, and the guy on the house watch looks at it, and it's a box where they're just sending us, engine only, and it's not even in our area. It's in the next area over where, I'll say 217 engine is. So we're like, all right, and it says report of an odor of smoke. We go, okay, so we head over that way, and we're wondering, why are we going over there? Where are all the companies, that are in that area? So as we get over to where this alarm box is a big church on the corner, and the church is on fire. Right? So we found out, naturally, the officer from my company, he transmits what we call 1075. 1075 means destruction fire. So later on, we found out where all the other companies were and why we were sent in there. All the other companies were out in the area trying to search down this odor of smoke. And we ended up coming in, and we found it. It was the church on fire. So on the side of the church, now this church is huge. It's an old-style church, almost like a cathedral. So along the side of the church, there's a row. It's like the church is like a block long, and it's all stained glass windows. And on that side of the church, there's the hydrant. So the chauffeur in my company. He pulls up, and because we're going to hook up to that hydrant. So as he hooks up to the hydrant, the fire is so intense in the church now that the windows, the stained glass windows on the side, start to explode, and fire is blowing out of them. So now he can't stay on that hydrant because the fire is coming out and it's going to set the rig on fire. It's going to set the engine on fire. And it's getting too hot to disconnect off the hydrant. So the chauffeur just grabs the axe off the engine and cuts through the hose, jumps in the engine and drives, pulls away, so that the rig didn't burn. So now the other companies are coming in, and we got on another hydrant and what have you. Well, when those windows blew out on the side, the radiant heat from those windows set 6 or 7 buildings on the other side of the street on fire. And to give you an idea how wide the street was, it was a 2-lane avenue with sidewalks. So that's how intense the fire was. It set these buildings on fire. So now we have the church on fire and 7 buildings across the street on fire. So it was quite the night and quite the experience to see that happen with the radiant heat. But it was something that I saw later on, my time working in that neighborhood, that because the buildings were made out of wood and they were 3-story buildings, it used to happen a lot. You get 1 or 2 buildings on fire and there'd be an awful amount of radiant heat coming off the buildings, and the next thing you know, one of the buildings across the street would burst into flames just from the radiant heat. So what they used to do a lot is if they had a radiant heat problem, they'd get one engine to wet the other buildings down so that they wouldn't go on fire. Again, one of the crazy things that used to happen down in that neighborhood. And then let's see, here's another job we had down there in Bushwick. One of my first jobs, I had about a year on the job, and we pull into this fire. We're first through tons of fire coming out. We got two 3-story frame buildings on fire. Anyway, so we get in there and stretch the line, and what we used to do a lot, the company I was in, we were known to be one of the only companies that when we pulled in and there was a lot of fire, rather than stretch an 1 3/4 line, we grabbed the 2.5. And the thing was, lots of fire needs lots of water. So we take the 2.5. Tough line to work with. I don't know how often you get to work with a 2.5-inch line, but you can do a lot of damage with it. Put out a lot of fire with that. So what we would do what we used to call it hit and run. And you'd come in and in this particular fire, we had fire right at the front door of the building, in the hallway, and it went up the stairs, up 3 flights to the 3rd floor. And it was what we called a gasoline job. Somebody had poured gasoline in the hallway and lit it up. So we'd come in with that line, stretch it, get into the 1st floor hallway, hit it, knock the fire down, head up the stairs to the 2nd floor, hit that fire, knock the fire down, and whatever was left burning behind us, what didn't get extinguished, the second line coming in would take care of that. And that's why we used to call it hit and run. It was like, get in there, hit it, and move as fast as you can to knock most of the fire down. And once we got most of it knocked down, then we could take our time extinguishing the rest of the fire, And so anyway, this particular job, we're now up on the top floor, and it's a pretty good job. And all of a sudden, the chief's aide comes up into the top floor and tells us the chief wants us down in the street. We're like, the captain is like, what do you mean down in the street? We're not done yet. You got to come down in the street. Chief wants you down the street. So I was like, all right, so we go down there. And what it was one of the guys that was working, this guy John, his son was in a really bad motorcycle accident. And they had a police car waiting down in the street to take John to the hospital out on Long Island where his son was. And what I'm getting at in the story is I learned that night what kind of brotherhood the fire department is. So a couple hours later, we're back in quarters and what have you, and waiting to hear from John. And John finally calls in and talks to the captain. Tells the captain how bad his son is. They weren't sure if his son was going to live or not. And he said to the captain, he goes, "Look, Cap, I don't know what's going on. I just got to wait for the doctors, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to come back to work." So captain was like, "John, don't worry about it. We got this." And the captain comes down to the kitchen where we are, and he tells us the story, what John told him and all that. And he says to the guys in the kitchen, he goes, "All right, look, John's not going to be able to work for who knows how long. So everybody just figure out who's going to work when John's supposed to work." And so that got whacked up, among the 25 guys in my company. And then when the word spread out throughout the battalion, the guys in the other companies were calling us saying, "Hey, you guys need help. You need somebody to cover, any of the tours that John's supposed to work." And they helped out too. And so what had happened, John probably didn't come to work for about 4 months. But in that 4 months time, he didn't lose any time on the job, because every time he was supposed to work, somebody else worked for him, and not getting paid overtime or anything. You came in on your own and you worked John's tour, so John got paid, and that was when I really learned what the fire department, or what the New York City Fire Department at least, was about. It wasn't about just, going out and fighting fires. It was about the brotherhood. It was about taking care of one another, and it was about making sure, everybody was okay. And like I say, the whole battalion chipped in. Guys come in and work for John. And luckily, thank God, he came back to work about 4 months later, and his son did survive, and but had to go through a lot of therapy after that because he had traumatic brain injury. But again, it was a good lesson in learning about the brotherhood of the job, because I've had other jobs before that, and I never worked in a job where people would do this for you. You had a problem and you didn't have to come to work, and everybody else would work for you, so you wouldn't lose any pay. And so that really impressed me about the job. And other things. There were other things too, like it was my dream to get on that job, and when it finally came true, and I can still say this today. I still do this. I mean, I'm retired from the job 20 years now, and I spent 21 years on the job, so that's like 41 years since I first got on the job. And I remember days, and I was telling my son now, who is getting ready to graduate from the New York City Police Academy, and his dream was always to become a New York City police officer. And I told him, I said, Matt, when you get assigned to your precinct, when you come into work, there's going to be some days you're going to open up your locker, and you're just going to look at the uniform hanging there, your uniform shirts, and you're going to look at the patch on that uniform shirt that says City of New York Police Department. I said, and you're just going to stand there in awe, trying to wonder if this is a dream or it's true. I said, because there were many times I remember coming into work, open up my locker, and all my uniform shirts are lined up in there, and the patches on the shoulder of the shirt, and it says Fire Department, City of New York. And I would stand there and just say to myself, I can't believe those are my shirts. I'm on this job. And my dream came true. And even today, like I say, 40 years later, you know, when I have to go to or I'm going to go to some fire department event, or unfortunately some fireman's funeral or so, and I take my dress uniform out to put it on, I still look at it and go, I can't believe that this was my job, you know, because I loved the job so much, you know, and it wasn't a job, you know, and I might have said that to you a while back. You know, that was one of the things that I learned about it, that it's not a job, it's a way of life, you know, and it's almost like, for lack of a better word, almost like a religion, like a religious calling, you know, and, you know, some guys may not get it because to some guys it is a job. But if you really, really love what you do, you're lucky enough never to go to work, you know, because going to work is going to a job where you're just going there, trying to make a living and get paid, and that's why they call it work. If you love what you do, how could that be work? They're paying you to do something that you love, you know, so that's why I say it's always a calling and a way of life, not not a job. But anyway, moving right along. Here's one. My first fire when I got assigned to Rescue 4. I show up about 8:15 in the morning, and the day tour starts at 9 o'clock. You know, so I come in and I get ready, get dressed, you know, relieve somebody who wants to go home, you know, so they can go home a little bit earlier. And now it's like 10 minutes to 9, and a job comes in, and we're getting sent. The intersection was Lefferts Boulevard and Jamaica Avenue, fire in multiple dwellings. So we head out to the job, and now I'm like, this is great. I'm in the firehouse 15 minutes. We're going out to a job, you know, and so on the way there, the fire goes to a second alarm, and it's a 6-story apartment house, and what we call a 6-story walk-up, no elevator. So we get there, and the fire had started on the first floor, and then what they have is called a light shaft in the building. That it's kind of like an open space in the center of the building that sunlight can come through, and there are windows on each floor into each apartment just to let the sunlight in. Well, the fire broke out on the first floor and broke through the window in the shaft. And what it did then, it then auto-exposed up the side of the building and broke from the heat. The glass broke, and it ended up in every apartment all the way up to the top floor. Now we got all these apartments on fire on each floor. So we get in there, and me and this guy Charlie are assigned to the top floor. Go check the apartment on the top floor and see, you know, how much fire we got up there. So we go up there, and force the door into this apartment. We crawl in. We got 2 rooms going in the back, 2 bedrooms going in the back. So now we call for a line, and we need a line up there on the top floor. And now the ladder companies, the truck company guys are coming up the stairs. So the engine now, they come up the stairs. And now there's so many guys up on the top of the stairs between us guys from rescue and the truck company guys that the engine's having trouble getting past them. You know, it's kind of like a log jam. So I lean over the railing, and I said to this kid that's got the nozzle, and I can see he's got a probie shield on, so he's a probationary fireman. And I said to him, listen, kid, give me your nozzle, climb over the railing, and I'll give you the nozzle back, you know, and then we'll go in there. Well, one of the rules on the job that you learn from the guys in your own house is never give the line up to anybody, and never give your tools up to anybody. So kid says to me, I'm not giving you the nozzle, because he thinks if he gives me the nozzle, I'm taking a line and I'm going in and putting the fire out, you know. So I said to the kid, look, I said, I'm not going to steal your line. Just give me the line, and you're not going to get up here any other way. Give me the line. So now I got to tell the kids, I said, look, yesterday I was in an engine. I know what you're talking about. I said, and I know you think because I'm in a rescue today, we're going to take your line. We don't do that. I said, so either hand me the line and climb over here, or we'll just get another company up here. So he finally looks at his officer, and his officer finally says to him, go ahead, give him the line. So he hands me the line, climbs over the railing, I hand him the line back, you know, and so now I said to him, all right, we're going to open the door, we're going to go down the hallway, got 2 bedrooms in the back, you know, we'll knock this out. So he goes, all right. So I'm down on my knees. And without looking over my shoulder, I just said to the kid, are you ready? And he goes, yeah. And I opened the door up. Well, when I opened the door up, I mean, I'm down on my knees, so everything's going out over my head. But all the heat and smoke and everything hits this kid in the face. Right? He drops the line, falls to his knees. You know, so now I hand him the line back. I could have very well just took the line and moved in, but I hand him the line back. I go, all right, you okay now? Yeah, all right, let's go. And we crawl down the hallway. So now the fire's out. And, I make my way downstairs out to the street, and I go searching for this kid, you know, this new kid. You know, so I find him, and I said, so how you doing? You're all right? You okay? Everything's all right? Which is something, when I was in the rescue, I always did that. I always made sure if we were pulling up and there were guys that already got their asses kicked and they were sitting out on a lawn or out on a sidewalk or somewhere or laid out on a lawn, before we went into the building, I would always stop and say, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? You know, because that was more important, making sure they were okay before you got into the fire, you know. So I searched the kid out, you know. And he goes, yeah, I'm all right. I'm okay, you know. And I said, what'd you learn up there? He goes, well, I learned not to stand up when somebody's going to open the door where the fire is. I go, exactly. I said, you know, you got to be on your knees. I said, this way everything goes up over your head, you know, and you don't get caught in all that shit, you know. And I said, you learn anything else? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, what should I have learned? I said, trust those guys in Rescue 4. We're not going to steal your line. I'm going to give your line back to you. You know, he goes, all right, okay. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is maybe 30 years later, me and 2 of the guys that I worked with in Rescue 4 and this other guy who was friends with one of the guys that I worked with in Rescue 4, and we're all retired firemen. Like I said, I knew 2 of the guys because I worked with them. But the third guy I didn't know. You know, so we're on our way to the airport because we're going out to California to a car show. And so on the way to the airport, we're telling fire stories. So I start telling the story about my first fire and rescue 4, and this kid that was the probie, and the whole story that I just told you, right? Well, the guy sitting in the back seat with me that I didn't know, he says to me, "Well, I'm going to tell you a story now." I go, "Okay, what do you got?" He goes, "That fire that you just talked about?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I was the probie." And I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here." Like I said, it was 35 years later. We're driving off to the airport, and the guy I'm sitting in the back seat of the car with was the probie, who was the kid on the line at my first fire and rescue 4. It's just
Small world.
Small world, yeah, exactly. A small world, And never knew his name. Never, probably, I don't know if I ever saw him again in my time on the job. I may have, but I don't remember. But get in the car and he goes, "Yep, I was the kid." He goes, "You know what I remembered the most about that?" I go, "What?" He goes, "You took the time out after the fire to come down and search me out to see if I was okay and to see if I learned anything." And I said, "Well, to me, that's what the job was all about. Take care of you guys, and if you knew something and you can pass it on to somebody, pass it on, And I said, and the way you thank somebody for that, you pass on their information to the next new guy you run into, And I said, and you just keep passing information, and that's how you learn, Now, on the other side of the coin of that story, that particular fire broke out in the first floor apartment, and there's one person got killed in the fire, So what had happened, the chief now, once the fire is out, the chief comes in to the first floor apartment, and he's kind of giving the first due truck company a hard time, because he wants to know how come nobody found his body, and how come they gave the primary search as negative, and now we find out that there's a victim in here, and yada, yada, yada. Well, anyway, one of the guys from my company, this guy Mike from Rescue 4, he's in there with the truck company, and they did the search. And the reason why they couldn't find the guy is so much debris had fell down. The guy was buried under the debris. All right? So at this point, they had found the guy before the chief came in, but they found him naturally after the fire was out. But the chief, he knew they found the guy, after the fire was out, but he didn't know where the body was. So the chief's standing there, and he's chewing these guys out for missing the body on a primary search. And this guy, Mike, says to him, "Chief, you want to calm down a minute?" And the chief, he knew Mike's last name. He goes, "What's your problem, Milner?" And Mike says, "Well, you want to take a couple of steps back and start your speech over again?" And the chief goes, "Why?" He goes, "Because you're standing on top of the body." And with that, the chief just did an about face and walked out. Just kind of a little bit of humor that took the wind out of the chief's sail. Here he is chewing the shit out of these guys for missing the body while he's standing on top of the body. He never saw the body, But anyway, once in a while, little kind of funny things like that would happen, And I'm just going through some notes here to see what other stuff. You got any other questions or anything, or anything you want to talk about?
No, I mean, so I just kind of, I put the phone on mute basically, so I'm typing and I don't want to hear the clicking in the background. But what about the Father's Day fire? Were you there? Do you know anything about that? I know it's kind of one of those big historic things that
Yeah,
with you
no,
guys, and I figured
actually,
there's a lot more to that story than just that.
yeah, actually, no, I was off that day. That was a Sunday, and I don't know if I told you, I used to have a limousine company, and I happened to be doing a wedding that day. And after the wedding was over, I got back home here, and my son, he was a little guy at the time, and he says to me, he goes, "Hey, Dad, don't you know a guy named Harry Ford? Isn't he in Rescue 4? And I go, "Yeah, I know Harry. Harry's in Rescue 4. I said, "Why?" He goes, "Oh." He goes, "Well, he got killed this morning." I'm like, "What?" So naturally I get on the phone and start making some phone calls, and found out what happened. Well, anyway, and Harry was one of these really, really seasoned firefighters. And Harry was going to retire in the next year, almost like Tom Williams. Harry had almost 30 years on a job, and just like Tom, he had less than a year left. He was getting out. So anyway, Harry was the chauffeur, and so they got assigned to a job up in the Bronx, because I don't know, Rescue 3 might have been, that's their borough, but they might have been somewhere else. So if they're operating somewhere else in the Bronx and another fire comes in the Bronx and they need a rescue, well, Rescue 4 goes up there. So anyway, on their way up to the Bronx, Rescue 3 finally goes back into service, and now they're heading over to the fire. So the dispatcher calls Rescue 4, said, "I Rescue 4, disregard, the Bronx fire, and take in this box number, and it's in the borough of Queens." And they were only like a few minutes away. Actually, the fire was kind of like below the bridge that they were on. So they made the U-turn in the toll plaza, and they head into the neighborhood's called Astoria, Queens. And they head into this fire. It's a fire in a hardware store. So the company, the guys get inside. This guy Mike Milner's working. Brian Hickey is the captain. There's Brian Fahey, John Gain, Harry Ford. All right, so Brian Fahey, Captain Hickey, Mike Milner, and John Gain, they get inside the building and they're doing a search inside the building. Harry goes around to the other side of the building, and there's a back door, all right, like a steel door. And he's going to force that door to get into the building from that end. And the door's giving him some trouble trying to force it, because he's by himself. So this guy John Downing, who was the chauffeur on ladder 163, he was on the turntable of the ladder truck because he was the chauffeur. He's going to operate the ladder, and he sees Harry is having a tough time with this door, so he climbs down off the ladder and he goes over to help Harry force the back door. And while they're trying to force the back door, the building blows up. And Harry and John got killed instantly. And another crazy thing, John Downey, he was going to finish up his tour at 6 o'clock that evening. That's the end of the day tour. And him and his wife and kids were leaving the next morning for a 2-week vacation to Ireland, because that's where his family was from. Anyway, like I said, Harry and John, they got killed instantly from the explosion. The building collapses. Mike Milner gets blown out of the building. John Gain, he describes what he sees, because he was with Captain Hickey. He goes, I feel myself floating in the air. He goes, and I look and I see Captain Hickey up against the ceiling, like he's floating in the air, and everything. I guess when things like that happen, things kind of become like slow motion in your sight, and so finally him and Captain Hickey come crashing down, and they work their way out of the building. So Captain Hickey's on the radio and he's calling for Harry. Harry's not answering. He doesn't know that Harry's already dead, and he's got Mike. They find Mike and they get together with Mike. So now it's Captain Hickey, Mike Milner, and John King. Now they're calling for Brian Fahey. Well, Brian Fahey, when the building exploded, he got blown down the stairs into the basement, and the stairs collapsed, and he got pinned under the stairs in the basement. So they finally get him on the radio, and Brian says on the radio, and he said if you could hear the radio transmissions, he was as calm as you could be. He got on the radio and he said, I'm at the base of the basement stairs. I'm pinned by the stairs. Just come and get me, And so now they're trying to get down to get him, but they can't get to the stairs because of the fire. They're trying to get into the basement. And, pretty much every company at the fire now is trying to get into the basement to get Brian. Right? And they're communicating with him on the radio. And they said he was as calm as could be, all right, yeah, I'm just sitting here waiting, and just come and get me. And he said, my air is getting a little bit low, and they finally found one way into the basement, but the heat coming from the fire was so hot they couldn't get down that way. And two of the guys that tried to get down that through that heat, one guy was this guy Pete Gansey, who was the chief of department, and just probably one of the best firefighters ever. And the other guy was Chief Downey, the chief of special operations. And this guy you would think could walk through fire. And the two of them together could not get through this heat to get to Brian. Well, unfortunately, they couldn't get to Brian, and Brian died in the basement. Basically ran out of air and suffocated. And it was pretty devastating fire for the guys that were there, because they were listening to Brian on the radio. They were able to communicate with him, and a lot of guys had a lot of problems after that fire, because this guy died because they couldn't get to him. He didn't die because the building fell on him, or he got crushed or anything. They just couldn't get to him, and he ran out of air and suffocated in the basement. And so that was the Father's Day fire. Another part of that fire, this other guy that he was in rescue too, another legend on the job, a fellow named Lee Ielpi. He was off duty that day, and he was over his son's house in Great Neck, and his son works in Squad 288. So they had the fire radio on in Lee's son's house, and Lee's son said, he goes, Dad, they got a good job going on in the story. He was there, for Father's Day dinner. He goes, come on, I got the chief's car. He was the chief in Great Neck Fire Department, volunteer fire department. He goes, come on, let's go take this in. Let's go see what's going on. So they go there, and now they're helping out in the dig and everything like that. And Lee's telling me the story at Harry Ford's funeral. He said, so finally he goes, I'm looking around for my son Jonathan. I'm like, where the hell is he? And I go over to this ambulance and I open the back door. He goes, and there's Harry Ford laying on a stretcher. He's dead. He goes, and there's my son Jonathan just sitting there holding his hand. And Lee said to me, he goes, one of the scariest things I ever saw is my good friend Harry's laying there dead and my son's holding his hand. Well, what happened with that? That was June 21st, 2001. Right? September 11th, 2001, Jonathan Ielpi got killed in a trade center collapse. Just kind of like an ironic thing, and a lot of guys that were at this fire got killed on September 11th. Chief Gansey, he got killed. Chief Downey got killed. Chief Moran got killed. A lot of firemen. Brian Hickey got killed. A whole ton of guys that were at this fire got killed on 9/11. And Brian Hickey, as a matter of fact, he was on medical leave and came back to work a few days before 9/11. And I was talking to him on the phone, because we were firemen together. And I said, Brian, what are you doing coming back? He said, he survived the collapse. We lost two guys. He said, you got, over 20 years on the job. You can get 3/4, disability pension from this. Why don't you get out? What are you doing? And he goes, now I'm on a chief's list. I just want to get promoted, and I want to be a chief. I'm like, all right, Brian, just be careful out there. Well, what happened to him on 9/11, the night before 9/11, they called him up and asked him if he wanted to work overtime on the day tour, on the 9/11 day tour, over in Rescue 3 in the Bronx. And he was like, yeah, I'll work overtime. And so he wasn't even scheduled to work. He came in to work overtime, and he got killed that morning. But just kind of some of the things are just a little bit ironic, how things happen. But that was pretty much the story of the Father's Day fire. Another sad thing was at Harry Ford's wake, his father said to us, he goes, the worst thing I ever had to do in my life was say goodbye to my dead son on Father's Day. And I could never imagine doing something like that, and his father was an old timer. His father passed away about 3 years later, but and Harry's son now, Harry Jr., no, it's not Harry Jr., his other son, I don't remember his name, he works in Ladder 108, where Harry started out as a fireman, so there's a little bit of legacy there. But well, like I said, it's kind of strange how some things come about. Like I said, Lee Ielpi telling me about his son holding Harry's hand, and a couple of months later, Jonathan gets killed. And Lee Ielpi worked in Rescue 2, and I'm sure in Rescue 2 threatened death many a times. But just the way, the way things turn out sometimes, I guess. But anyway, so that was that. That was that fire. And hey, did I tell you about I tell you about our dog in 218 engine?
You did not.
Well, we got it. What happened? We were coming back from, I don't know, maybe shopping, grocery shopping for lunch or dinner. I don't remember what. And stopped at a light. And one of the guys on the rig, this guy Conway, he sees this little puppy in the middle of this vacant lot. So he's like, hold on, wait a minute. He gets out. He gets this little puppy, a little black and white dog. Couldn't have been more than maybe a month old, So brings the dog back to the firehouse. We come back to the firehouse with the dog. So this guy Marty, who was one of the senior men of the company, he goes, well, what are you going to do with the dog? And so Conway goes, I guess we'll keep him. He goes, well, I don't know how that's going to work out because, Captain said no dogs in the firehouse. So we were like, yeah, well, let's see, maybe we can work on the captain. He goes, all right, let's see what happens. So anyway, the next, I don't know if it's the next day or maybe a couple of days later, the captain comes in and, we're all working. And captain comes in the kitchen and he sees the dog in the box. And he says, whose dog is that? So Conway says, well, Cap, he's our dog. We found him the other day in a lot. And the captain goes, no. No dogs in the firehouse. No, I don't want no dogs in the firehouse. So we were like, come on, Cap. So, and my captain, as tough as he was, his bark was worse than his bite. He was a tough guy, but he had a heart of gold, So anyway, we're like, come on, Cap, let's no. So Conway gets the dog, and he goes, come on, Cap, just hold the dog, So the captain goes, all right, give me the dog, He's got the dog in his hand, and the dog reaches out with his tongue and licks the captain's nose. So right away, we jump in and we go, oh, look, Cap, the dog just kissed you. The dog loves you. So finally, the captain goes, all right, let's see how he works out. And so he goes, well, what's the dog's name? So Conway, quick thinker, jumps in. He goes, well, we didn't name him yet, Cap. We were waiting for you. We figured, you're the captain here. You should name the dog. Oh, again, touching the captain's heart, so to speak. So the captain, being a German, he goes, all right, let's see. All right, we're going to name the dog Wolfgang. So we're like, yeah, all right, yeah, Cap, that's a great name for the dog, Wolfgang. So the dog's name was Wolfgang, but naturally everybody called the dog Wolf, So anyhow, this dog was the smartest dog I have ever seen in my life. And I thought that this dog was going to be a nut job because of the 25 guys that worked in the firehouse. It's like having 25 masters. Well, Conway was kind of like the dog's real master. Wolf had a mind of his own also. And he would make every single run that we went on. He was the first one out to the rig, waiting for somebody to open the door so he could jump on the rig. And when we would go out to a call or out to a fire or whatever it was, and if Wolf didn't get off the rig, if he stayed on the rig, if we told him to stay on the rig, and he sat in the rig there, in the fireman's compartment of the rig, and you walked up to the rig and you weren't dressed like a fireman, it sounded like there was a wild animal in the rig. He went nuts if a civilian walked up to his fire truck, And then on some of the calls that we went to where we would let him out of the rig, and there were spectators watching the fire or whatever incident we were at. Wolf used to walk up and down by the spectators, but he would never get close enough to the spectators where they could reach out and pet him or anything. He always stayed that little bit more than arm's length away from them. You know, it's just incredible. If you weren't a fireman, he didn't want anything to do with you. You know, and like I said, some of the funny stories we had a lieutenant that was just going to cover. One of our lieutenants was on vacation, and so this lieutenant was going to cover that vacation, and he happened to be a black guy. His name was Reggie. Now, we had two black firemen in the company, this guy Al and this guy Ronnie, and the dog got along with them, no problem. They could come in and out of the firehouse, no problem, because Wolf knew them, right? Well, this lieutenant shows up to the firehouse and walks in the front door, and he's not dressed like a fireman. He hasn't changed into his uniform yet. And the dog goes charging out there after him, and the dog won't let him in the firehouse. You know, and the dog's standing there, and he's like, "Arr!" We had to go out and say to the dog, Wolf, it's okay. He works here. It's okay. It's okay. You know, so he let Reggie in. Well, until he got to know that Reggie belonged there, the next couple of tours, every time Reggie showed up, Wolf wouldn't let him into the firehouse, and Reggie would stand there and go, Wolf, what are you going to do? You going to fuck with me again? You know? But then Reggie would go upstairs, put his uniform on, and he'd come downstairs, go in the kitchen, and Wolf would come over, and Reggie would bet him because now he's dressed like a fireman. You know, so it took a couple of tours for Wolf to realize that Reggie belonged there, and then he would let him come in his civilian clothes. But some of the other things that he would do, when he was a puppy, we had, I don't know if it was a promotion party or a retirement party, so we had in the firehouse. And so there was some alcoholic beverages going around, and somebody had put a little bit of beer in the dog's dish, and the dog was only a few months old. So Wolf drank up the beer. The next morning, we're looking for the dog, and we can't find him. Like, where the fuck is the dog? We're looking all over the firehouse for the dog. Where's the dog? Can't find the dog. Right? So finally, this guy John, he moves the couch, and there's the dog laying between the couch and the wall in the darkness behind the couch. And basically, the dog's got a hangover. You know, the dog was like unconscious, didn't want to come out at all. So we get the dog out and give the dog a little bit of water. And then after the dog drinks his water, he goes right back in. And he stayed behind that couch for a couple of days. We just come out and have a little bit of water and then go back behind the couch. So his hangover was over. Well, the point of the story is, how many times do you go out, get drunk, get a hangover, and once your hangover cleared up, you turned around and said, oh, fuck this, I'm never doing that again. I'm never drinking again. You know, and then the following weekend you would go out and get drunk all over again. Well, this dog got drunk once, and after that, this dog would not come near any alcohol whatsoever. If we had a bottle of wine on the table to have a little bit of wine with dinner, and you took the cork out of the wine bottle and you called Wolf over, the Wolf came over and sniffed the cork, he'd run the other way. If you had a beer can, an empty beer can, and you called Wolf over, he'd come, he'd sniff the beer can and run the other way. And he said, you know, what's funny about that? Like I said, we go out, we get drunk, have our hangover, and we say, I'm never going to do that again. And then we go out and do it the following weekend. He said, and we call these guys dumb animals. He drank once, got one hangover, and that's it. Never touched alcohol again. You know, that was another unique thing about Wolf. And he was a fast learner too. He, if you told him something, you know, if he got yelled at for something, for doing something, he never did that again. There was one time he was still a pup. He was still too small to jump up on the rig yet. And this guy Jerry had barbecued up some steaks on the barbecue. Well, a run came in, and a couple of the steaks are sitting on the table. When we come back, and Wolf had gotten to the steaks and ate part of the steaks. And Jerry had a shit fit, and Jerry's screaming and yelling at the dog for eating the steaks. Well, after that, that dog never went near that table again unless he was invited to come over by the table. He knew that table was off limits. And another thing he did, he got caught one time laying in one of the bunks in the bunk room. And one of the guys yelled at him and said, get off the bed. You know, you're not allowed on that bed, you know, yelling at the dog. Well, one night, it was a cold winter night. And I'm up in the bunk room, I'm in bed, and I hear the door to the bunk room open, you know, and I wasn't asleep yet, and I try to lift my head up to see who's coming up to bed. And I look and I see, here comes Wolf through the door. So I'm like, I wonder what he's going to do. So I'm watching him, and he's walking along, and he's stopping at every bunk to see if anybody is in it. And he finally comes to a bunk where there's nobody in it. And I'm like, I wonder if he's going to jump up into the bunk, because it was a cold night. Well, in the wintertime, we always had an extra blanket folded at the end of every bunk in case it got too cold. Well, Wolf reaches up with his mouth, grabs the folded blanket from the end of the bunk, pulls it down out of the bunk onto the floor, and lays down on the blanket and goes to sleep. Would not get up into the bunk because he was told he didn't belong up there. You know, and then some of the funny things he would do. Every time we would go out, if we got relocated to another firehouse, and we didn't teach him this. He did this stuff on his own. We would go to another company's firehouse, and we would be relocated there because, you know, maybe they were out of a job, so we were backing them up. Before we left that firehouse, he would crack on their floor and steal somebody's glove. He never cracked in our firehouse. But any other firehouse we went to, he would crap on their floor and steal one of their work gloves in the firehouse.
That seems like a trick that he was trained.
I don't know. Nobody owned up to that, you know, but he would do that just about every single time, you know. And I mean, the gloves maybe, because guys used to play with him in the firehouse, you know, with an old work glove or so. So that we kind of figured, you know, that's why he was stealing the glove. But the crap on their floor was really funny, you know. And then what happened to him? He, I'm gonna say he lasted about 8 years or so. And what happened? His back legs, his hips gave out, and Conway had taken him to the vet because the dog was having trouble walking, and Conway took him to the vet, and they did X-rays and everything, and the vet said, you know, the dog's in a lot of pain, and his hips are shot, and so Conway said, you know, how would that happen? And And the vet knew that the dog was from the firehouse, and he goes, well, does he jump up and down on your rig? And Conway said, yeah. He goes, every fire. He goes, well, that's what caused it, the jumping up and down on the rig all the time. So Conway asked the vet, he goes, what do we do about this? He goes, there's really nothing you can do about it. He goes, he's in a lot of pain, and my best suggestion is, you put him down. So Conway came back to the firehouse and told the guys what the prognosis was. And, we made a decision to put him down. As much as we didn't want to do that, you could see the dog was in pain. So Conway made an appointment to the vet to bring Wolf in there to put him to sleep. So on Wolf's last day in the firehouse, we had a big going away party in the firehouse, and every company in the battalion came by to say goodbye to Wolf. And after that was over, Conway and this guy Reuben, they took Wolf over to the vet, and the vet put Wolf down. And then what they did is we had Wolf cremated, and this is going back now, I'm going to think probably around 1988 this happened. They had him cremated. His ashes are in a box, and if you go to 218 Engine today, in the kitchen, up on the shelf, is the box with Wolf's ashes in it, and above the box is an oil painting of Wolf. So he's still in that firehouse. But he was just an unbelievable dog. It, like I said, one of the smartest dogs I ever saw. There are other things I could probably, if I think things that he would do, that were, it was just like, how the fuck does he know how to do that? And he would just do shit, and do things. He would do things that make you laugh, and just a great dog. I never forget that dog. It's unbelievable. But that's a story of Wolf. And anyway, and did I tell you earlier? I talked to my friend. I did. I told you about talking to my friend Phil about writing the books, and he told me what to do. Yeah, but it's getting. What time is it anyway?
10:30 here. What time is it there for you? Probably 11.
10:30. Yeah. What is it? Oh, 11:30. Yeah, it's 11:30. Yeah. But anyway, that's about that. So I think I'm going to call it early at night unless you have any questions, because I got to get up early tomorrow morning.
No, that sounds good. I think we covered a lot of good stuff, and I appreciate your time, sir. I will shoot you a text message, and hopefully those cups should be there tomorrow. I mean, don't hold me to it, but I'll send you the tracking information on it.
I'll let you know when they get here. All right.
I appreciate it, sir. Have a good night.
All right. How's everything been with you though? Are you catching any work?
No work. Lots of medical.
Oh yeah. That's kind of like the story of the job today. Even in the city, fires are way, way, way down, and medical runs are way, way, way up. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of medical and a lot of traumatic stuff. Bad accidents and
emergencies,
shootings, those kinds of emergencies. Yeah, there's very rarely, and even if there are fires, it's a lot of times, by the time you get there, things go rock and roll so fast. By the time we get a call, you get there and it's just a big ball of orange.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a big fire, but it's no longer work. It's a surroundings around.
Mm-hmm.
But
and then a lot of the ones we have, probably 99% of the fires we get are abandoned buildings. There's not a car in the driveway. There's not any worry of there being maybe we might know that, hey, there was a homeless guy in this one, but he's sitting across the street smoking a cigarette, so we know he's not in there. So those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, those things you still got to be careful in those things because they're abandoned buildings and they're vacant, and you don't know what is the floor good, is the stairway good, stuff like that. So you got to be careful in those buildings.
Yeah, for sure.
Easy buildings to get hurt in, buildings that are vacant and abandoned. But all right, so I'll make some more notes or so, or you get some more things, questions or whatever, and we'll do it again.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate it, sir. Have a good night.
All right, son. Have a good night. Stay well
You
out
too.
there.
All right.
Bye now.